We're now at the top of page 3 of the NEFAR recommended form of purchase and sale agreement. For experienced agents, this will be a change. This used to be on page 6. It's the buyer's inspection paragraphs. The committee decided and the board of directors agreed that we ought to put things in chronological order as they happen in the transaction. And so what happens soon is inspections. So now it's paragraph 3 at the top of page 3. It's one of the most important paragraphs in the contract. Notice that in line 108 it says it's an as-is. That is, as is with the buyer's right to inspect and either cancel or ask for repairs. Lines 112 to 122 talk about the seller having to make the property accessible, and if the seller does not, then the extension is automatic. You get more days to inspect if the seller wouldn't let you in. We did add in line 115 to clarify that the utilities have to be on, quote, through the date of closing, period. That wasn't clear in the previous version, though it was clear in the listing agreement. Now, the critical part begins with line 117. Within blank days, 10 if left blank, the buyer can inspect. A lot of people leave it at 10. Some put 15. In my opinion, most sellers wouldn't accept an offer if you went more than 15. I know that some people like to put 5 to encourage the seller to accept their offer. They said, look, we'll get it done right away. We have an inspector on standby. Now, notice some new words in line 118. It says buyer may, but the new words are in bold, but is not required to inspect. I was asked so often, does the buyer have to do inspections? The answer was no. There are 3 times where it says inspections, if any. I'll point them out as we get there. But to even make it more clear, we've said but is not required. So I like to say that the buyer has a free look during the 10 or 15-day period, whatever you fill in. The buyer has a free look. They could wake up on the first day or the last day and say, you know, it's a great house, I just don't want it. So it's a free look. But if the buyer doesn't terminate or ask for repairs, then they take it as is. Look at lines 122 through 134, and we say to the buyer, we suggest that you inspect for the following items. And we've listed just about everything we can think of, including some that are not that common, like checking for salt water and freshwater ground permeation. We talk about asbestos, we talk about defective flooring, and a new one is line 129. It says determining if the property is in a community development district, and if so, what is the cost? So again, we're trying to be fair to the buyer. Open your eyes and inspect for all of these things. Now look at 135. We have a new word or two. It says if buyer determines in buyer's sole and absolute discretion. It's in bold. The words and absolute are new to make it clear that the buyer can get out for any reason. It might be the best home inspection in the world and the buyer could get out, or the buyer didn't even have to do an inspection. So what happens if the buyer gets to near the end of the inspection period? What do? They can either terminate, is in line 137, by giving a written notice. That is, the buyer's realtor would email the seller's realtor saying the buyer's terminating. Or it says the second bullet point in 140 is to request repairs and give a copy of all of the inspection report. All reports you got, not just the page that talks about what repair you're asking for, but all of the entire inspection reports. And then it gives the seller 7 days after that to determine if they want to make the repairs. They may want to get some estimates. And if the parties haven't reached agreement within those next 7 days, then the buyer has 3 more days after that to terminate in writing. If the buyer doesn't do so, then the buyer takes it as is without any repairs. Notice it says repairs, if any, in line 138, and it also says it in line 153. The end of page 3 says that the buyer must make sure that they pay their inspectors, and that if anybody is hurt on the property, then it's not the seller's fault. It's the buyer has to take responsibility for that. That concludes page 3.